All right, I'm going to move on to our brewery in Albany, Georgia. We're located down in Albany, southwest Georgia, on 1,700 acres of land. Can't really tell too much from this picture, but this used to be a military base. And so in 1979, let me just go right to this. Miller, at the height of the Miller Lite catching on in the market, went out and constructed several breweries. Eden, North Carolina, Trenton, New Jersey, Irwindale, California. The footprint looks identical for the most part. If you go to any of these breweries, I can walk in, I can tell you where the ladies' room is, I can tell you where the plant manager's office is. They are laid out the same, the packaging lines. So that's really pretty good. We also have the Fort Worth Brewery, which was an old Stroh's brewery, beautiful brewery, but not quite laid out like us, some very different capabilities. If any of you have been to Golden, you know that's a monster brewery, the largest brewery in the world, in fact. And there's several buildings, several blocks within the valley, so very different. And then the Milwaukee brewery is actually comprised of 79 different buildings that have been bolted on. And I think they estimate that the beer goes across the street like 3 or 4 times in the process. That's just how convoluted the layout has become. And you can actually, if you go down the street between the brewery, you can see the beer being conveyed overhead in a glass enclosure, of course. But in Albany, we have about 600 full-time employees. Our capacity, like I mentioned earlier, is about 10 million barrels. We'll probably run close to 8.8 this year. We've never had to run 10 million. But I will say that the joint venture allowed us to get about 2 million barrels of production into the facility. Prior to the joint venture, we were considered the swing plant. And I don't know if anybody's been in that kind of situation where you're kind of the one that you get the cats and dogs nobody wants because you really want the volume because you're trying to make sure you cover your fixed cost. And you get stuck with that junk in the end because now you're the only one that can make it, or they won't take it back, or it's a weird package and they threw out the equipment or whatever. So we are still kind of the people that they look to make several very unique packages, very unique brands. And we make 45 brands in that brewery. That's including our Miller Coors line, as well as some contract brands that we produce for other brewers that probably don't want me to call their name. All righty. Packaging lines, we have 5 bottle lines, 5 can lines, and 1 keg line. And we can have about 40 configurations of packaging combinations, if you will, that we have. It feels like a lot more than that when we're running it. That's because you start putting the brands into it. But quite frankly, I mean, you know, we got the 6-pack, which I always thought was kind of basic, and then somebody wanted a 4-pack, and somebody wanted 12, 18, 24, you know. And I guess they couldn't do 4 6-packs, but we put it together for them however they wanted. 18 packs. We do 18 packs as well. So 20 packs. And I understand from the marketing group that there is some logic behind it. They just won't share it with us, but we go with it. In terms of our product distribution, we can store up to 14,000 pallets. We don't like to get that full. It gets to be gridlock. But that's about 65,000 barrels. And we ship any day roughly 35,000 barrels a day. And so we try to keep our inventory in the time around 50,000 max, because after that it just starts getting really interesting with the picks. Our warehouse is semi-automated. We have a 25,000 square foot warehouse. We also operate a 12-story ASRS unit and a 32 robotic laser-guided vehicles for the pickup from the palletizer to staging areas. We have 500 BPAs that we deal with locally. When I say BPA, I mean brand package alcohol configuration. And then we also add on CLL, which are lit label requirements for tax purposes. And we come up with about 1,700 SKUs in a year. That also includes a lot of the promotional items. So every football team has to have their own label. And then we do something for soccer and Easter Bunny, whoever. We'll make them a special label for them. We have a 500 spot drop yard. Most of our loads are, the trailers are dropped on the yard and we load it. And that helps us out a lot because when you're trying to run 11 lines and get all of the right product at the right time, something's going to break down. something's not going to be there. So when it gets there, we pull a trailer in, load it, and then the carrier can come pick it up. That accounts for not quite 70%, and the rest are live drivers. During peak, which is now for us, we can load up to 280 trucks per day, hopefully, and 16 rails. We don't have very many customers that take rail beer, but we do have some down in South Florida. And in calendar year 2010, we shipped to all 50 states and 42 countries. I'm not going to say too much about the challenges because I think that you've heard them over and over. It's the same thing with everybody else, rising material costs, energy costs. The economic recovery has been slower than expected or had hoped. And, you know, people think, well, if you're in the beer business, you're immune. You're not really immune. We have people who trade down and buy less, some of our lower margin products at the time. But, you know, it's keeping our volume there, and that's a good thing. So in that sense, we are somewhat immune. I figured pretty early that if I stayed in the vices business, I would always have a job. So I didn't cigarettes or drinking or gambling, whatever. And it's pretty true. It's been fairly steady for us since we got the volume in. The seasonality, of course, of our business does provide us some challenges. I mean, you're trying to get carriers to lock up drivers, and then most of our business is done in 4 months between April and August. And that's when we make 60% of our profit for the year. So after that, where do those drivers go? We're trying to, you know, work with carriers who have some other business that may be, you know, in our off season. We do get a second peak in Albany because we service Puerto Rico exclusively for Miller Coors. And that accounts for about 10% of our volume. So when we're having the down season here, the islands are picking up for their tourist season. So that helps us out quite a bit and makes us a little more stable than some of the other breweries in our network. But the other part about the seasonality part that's hard for us to cover, you see we had the huge brewery out in Golden. Nobody's going to destroy that asset. But we need beer when it's hot, and we need it down here in Florida. So we started moving beer all around the country to make sure that we're getting beer to the spring breakers, to California, to the areas that it needs to be ramped up to, and then we bring it back down. And it's a challenge. Further, in terms of seasonality, right now we're competing with produce people from Florida for that 30% of those brokered loads. So right now, I think it's far more profitable to haul tomatoes or whatever, but it makes it very difficult for us every year around this time to shore up that volume, or I should say that capacity, that carry capacity. Increased competition and shifting consumer preferences. I did mention to you that our craft lines are doing extremely well right now. And we're not the only ones that are doing craft. We're doing craft on a larger scale, on a commercial scale. But a lot of companies, businesses, bars, restaurants are getting into producing beer on site. We compete with that. Right now, while the economy is a little bit down and people aren't eating out as much, that's helping us out. But we do know that at some point the economy will turn around and we will be competing with those craft brewers. And we also compete here in America with the wine and spirit industry pretty heavily. The beer market has been relatively flat for the past several years. So we have to really try to get the cost benefit, the scale, any way we can. That's the only way for us to remain competitive. Even with us being in this joint venture, we're only about 35% of the market for the U.S. So. And then flexibility to react to distributor requirements. One thing that's kind of interesting is, like I said, we have a lot of different packages. People are getting into a lot of different tastes. We have to change flavorings. We're doing, you know, orange sparks, blackberry sparks, lemon sparks, iced tea beer. And to be able to do it quickly and do the changeovers quickly and be able to not generate a lot of waste while you're doing that gets to be pretty tricky. We also have a number of international customers that want us to provide very specialized package configurations for their country-specific packaging, where they want primary, secondary, tertiary labeling that has to have the distributor's name. I mean, very specific, but they only want 2 pallets of it. You know, so we don't run a microbrewery. It's like trying to stop on a dime, but at the same time, we're trying to do whatever we can to help these other help our customers grow their business. So it's just a challenge, and we do try to employ automation as much as possible. But again, that presents some challenges because once you put in a fixed automation system, things that we would normally throw people at, you can't necessarily do that anymore. Ways that you would normally store pallets, maybe double stack, you lose that capability. So there are pluses and minuses to it. That being said, though, I'm all for automation. Uh, I won't tell that joke. But anyway, we in Albany, one of the things we're doing right now is extending our truck loading or extending our laser guided vehicle to try to load trucks with it now. And it's going pretty well. We've done a prototype. We've actually got the project in, and this thing, hopefully it'll run. The quality is tremendous because the loads are so consistently loaded. And we don't have people on forklifts, you know, tearing up the pallets or running into the beer real hard or any of that kind of thing. And it also allows us to have a very even predictability in terms of what the load rate is going to be as long as the beer is available. So that's good for our carriers and our spotting yard. In the meanwhile, while that's running, we're continuing to try to optimize our network. We're still trying to move beer around, trying to find out what the right fit is, trying to find the right order tool, the right planning tool, the right ERP tool, even a huge project going on with that right now, so that we can get on one system because we are still operating with two very distinct IT systems. The truck load weight maximization, again, using, like you said, lightweight equipment. Trying to look at how we configure orders so that we can put lighter product with heavier product so that we can maximize what we can send out on a shipment. Similarly, we're trying to cube out our rail load weights, which is something that you would think we should have done it a long time ago, not real sure why we were shipping air, but we tried to get really creative and come up with a way that we could ship heavier, or actually we're double stacking the rails in order to be able to do that. And then working with our distributors to have an extended unloading window to improve carrier equipment utilization. A lot of the distributors only work Monday through Thursday or Friday noon, which is fabulous for them, but not so good for us because we have to run 24/7 to get the volume out during peak. And if we can't store it all, so we have to try to work with them. This is something new for them to stay open to actually receive the product so that we can get those trucks back. And with that, we're not going to take questions right now. I think we're going to wait, right? All right. Thank you, y'all.